You are listening to Over and Back's Basketball Mysteries of the 1970s. Today's mystery is, what were the most amazing seasons of the 1970s? All right, we are back, and we are talking about some of the best individual seasons of the 1970s. And we've got some good ones here, obviously. A lot of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, as you might expect. Some Dr. J, of course, but we obviously wanted to avoid having it be the same seasons by the same players, because that would get a little boring. So we're going to throw a few different ones here in the mix.
Yeah, because if you do, we ran a query on a Basketball Reference, and we did the best 70 seasons by win shares per 48, and I believe Kareem has the top 4, and then I believe 5 of the top 10 as well. So that's not very fun or interesting, but so we wanted to mix it up a little bit. We got one per player, so you'll hear one Kareem season we think, or by our measure, by most measures, one of the best seasons of Kareem's career, if not the best season of all time. And then we got a few other people in here as well that we kind of jumped in with just single individual seasons of each of those guys, so it didn't get boring of us going, yeah, Kareem in 73 was good, and then 72 he was also good, and then, oh wait, in 77 he was good too. So we didn't want to do that because that's no fun.
Right. Yes. So we start off with Spencer Haywood in 1970, his rookie season in the ABA with the Denver Rockets, later to become the Nuggets, of course. Led the ABA as a rookie, coming out as an underclassman, 30 points per game, 19.5 rebounds per game, 2.216 win shares for 48, 17.1 win shares. All those things led the NBA, again, as a rookie. And he and helped lead the team to the playoffs, where they would actually lose in the playoffs, sort of an upset to the Los Angeles Stars, but would still lead them to 51 wins and a pretty good season before he would leave for the Seattle Supersonics, and never really quite achieved that same level of success again, for whatever reason. He may have taken advantage a little bit of the weaker competition in the ABA in the earlier years, but certainly for that one season, one of the great seasons of the decade.
Yeah, it's pretty startling how big his numbers drop, going into the NBA. And it's not to say that he wasn't a great player even when he went to the NBA. I think he was a 4-time All-Star in the NBA. But you look at that first year and you go, man, that guy was just a killer. And he just never quite got there. Again, I think 1 year in Seattle, maybe 73, he averaged nearly 30 points, I think 29 or something similar to there. So he got very close at times, but yeah, nothing like that. He was just an absolute world beater that first and only year in the ABA that he came in and won Rookie of the Year, and was a big part of that team as well, with him and Larry Jones, the Denver Rockets. So before they became the Nuggets and all that other good stuff that we talked about on a previous episode, where they moved around and did all that other fun stuff. So, all right, so I'll move to Zelmo Beaty, 1971 Utah Stars. Now, this is actually, surprisingly, if you do the query that we mentioned, the win shares per 48 in the 70s, Zelmo Beaty has your 5th highest single season win shares per 48. Yes, 4 Kareem Abdul-Jabbars, and then Zelmo Beaty right after him. And it's his age 31 season, which is interesting because it's such a stark contrast to Spencer Haywood, who we just talked about, who's, an underclass rookie who's dominating here. This is, Zelmo Beaty at age 31, where, it's not the prime of his career, but he's still putting up this just ungodly great year. 22.9 points per game, but that really wasn't his, big thing. 15.7 rebounds per game. That's where he really made his mark. ABA best, 55.5% from the field. 2.64 win shares per 48. That was best in the ABA. 16 win shares, again, best in the ABA, and then a 25.2 PER rating, which again was best in the ABA. So just had an awesome year and led them to the championship, led by Zelmo, Coach Bill Sharman, and a veteran squad. The Stars, of course, won the ABA championship against the Kentucky Colonels. We've talked about that in previous episodes as well. But yeah, just an unbelievable season for Zelmo, who also is a guy who, if a lot of people, and I hope during this entire summer, new names have come to you or whatever, he's a guy that, the more I look at it, I go, man, this guy was awesome. He was really, really good for a pretty long amount of time as well. And I just don't know that he gets enough credit, likely because of the ABA. But yeah, just an absolute great season and a great career for Zelmo.
Yeah, and he obviously a guy who a very good big man for to the mid to late 60s. Had a career here a year after sitting out a year when he jumped to the ABA. Had to sit out a year because of the option clause.
Yeah, his age 30 season too, which is like, you got to imagine that's another really super productive year. I mean, and you look at, the prime of your career, that's a year season completely lost.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he said that sitting out that year really helped him physically, helped kind of rest his
Which
knees.
I can see too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So,
well, because he comes back at 31 and has that year that we're talking about. So it's like, oh, okay, like
right.
That was nice. Like,
yeah, and led the Stars to the championship as well. Yeah, we got into a lot more with Curtis Harris talking about the Stars, but obviously, definitely a standout. I hadn't known at the time that it was the 5th highest single season win just for 48 in the entire decade. I mean, that's obviously pretty impressive. And then next, the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar season that we did pick was the 1972 season, where he had a .340 win shares for 48, 34.8 points per game, best in the league, 16.6 rebounds, 57% shooting, 25.4 win shares, and 29.9 PER. So is that the best win shares for 48 season ever?
I think it is. Okay. Let me look it up real quick. I am almost positive it is, but let me confirm that. But that number is ridiculous. Like, that's just ungodly. Let's see here. I'm almost positive it is, but let me definitely make sure before I say that for certain. Oh God, let's add the ABA in there, just in case. I only did the NBA. That's not fair. Maybe he's a League Two, right? It's not going to matter. It's definitely going to be Kareem. Yeah, okay, so he's number 1. Number 2 is Wilt Chamberlain, 1964. He's at 25, so 0.4 under. And then George Mikan, 51 at 23.4. So it's basically those two, Kareem and Wilt, 72, 64. That's so far ahead. And then there's Wilt, Kareem, Wilt, and then Michael Jordan, 1988. So
there you go. So to put the win shares in context, the entire 76ers team last season, in the 2016 season, had a little over 17 win shares. So Kareem had 25.4 on his own. So that's
right. And that's not like the greatest team to bring, but like essentially they would have been a world better if they just had Kareem play and none of their other players.
But yeah, maybe it doesn't quite work like that. But
no, it does. No, it absolutely does.
Yeah.
Yes. 5-on-1, Kareem on his own. You would definitely get at least 6 or 7 more wins, is what I think I'm unequivocally say right here, right now. So, and
of course that was the 69. That was the year that the Lakers won 69 games. Had incredible years from Wilt and West, and that team winning 33 games in a row. So the Bucks actually lost to the Lakers in the playoffs, and Kareem did not get his championship. 71 was the year that he won the championship. So he had an even better season, but for whatever, the team ran into that Lakers juggernaut and was unable to defend their title, even though probably in any other year, that Bucks team, which was also historically great, probably would have won the championship.
Absolutely. We'll double dip here in 1972 because we're going to go to Chet Walker, the Chicago Bulls Chet Walker. He deserves a lot of credit, so we'll double dip that year. His basic numbers don't jump off the page, 22 points per game, 6.1 rebounds per game, but 2.68 win shares per 48, 14.5 win shares, and 21.8 PR, all great numbers, even though still pretty overshadowed by Kareem. So but like, you really can't compare anybody to Kareem, especially not that season, which might be the greatest season of all time, and we mentioned by win shares it is the greatest season of all time. But that Chet Walker season still very good. And he's a guy who derived his value from a bunch of different ways as well. A good defender on a team that was kind of getting, a little bit of a fire going under them. Of course, in a few years, they would, have a nice little run, never, win a title, but get very close a few times, and then it would all just fall apart into the abyss. But definitely a great season for Chet Walker in 1972 as well.
Yeah, and that was that I believe was the 5th best win shares for 48 season in the NBA. So, or in the 70s in the NBA or the ABA that entire decade. So Chet Walker. I mean, I obviously know quite a bit about him from being a great player from the 76ers in the 60s and the Bulls in the early 70s. But that's really that was in a better season than he generally had. That was obviously a career year for him. But for him to be on that list as a guard, usually those numbers, especially during that era, are dominated by big men. I mean, other than Julius Erving, pretty much everybody in the top 15 is a center. So the fact that he was able to, have the 5th best season according to that metric is pretty wild.
Absolutely.
And next we have the 73 season, Tiny Archibald with the Kansas City-Omaha Kings. That year he led the NBA in points per game, assists per game, free throws attempts, field goals attempted, and minutes played. In fact, his 3,681 minutes are the 13th all-time in a single season. The only player other than Wilt Chamberlain, to accumulate that number of minutes in 80 games or fewer. And the Kings missed the playoffs despite that year, which is amazing that he could take off and then would lose head coach Bob Cousy very soon afterward, and would kind of transition to a new era. Archibald would get hurt in I think 75 or 76, and he would struggle for a little bit before catching on with the Celtics in the and helping key their early success in the early 80s.
Yeah, that team, again, you look at like how they were 36 and 46 with like that, and that makes just how just not very good the rest of the team was. And it's not I would not advise you to look at their basketball reference page. I see why Coach Bob Cousy said, you know what, you take everything. But you have Sam Lacey, Tom Van Ardsdale, Nate Williams, Matt Gukas is on there. So not like, I mean, they're names that you've heard of, but like just, the wrong combination of like young guys. Like they were all very young at that point as well. So.
Yeah, they had obviously needed room to grow, and we're a strong team despite having the great Archibald season. And he's actually he's often credited as the first to lead the league in points and assists, but actually Oscar Robertson did so before. They sort of changed the calculation later, so Tiny gets the credit for that, but Oscar actually deserves the credit for that. So Curtis Harris has pointed that out to us before, so we want to make sure we keep that one clear.
So we interrupt this great podcast that you're listening to. My name is Kevin Rayfuse.
I'm Tim Tompkins.
And I'm Justin Kuzart.
And we host the Drive and Dish NBA podcast.
We cover every team in the league and a bunch of really fun segments like Random NBA Player, Drive and Dougal, and Hot Takes from Reddit.
So when you're done listening to this podcast, give us a search on iTunes or whatever podcast streaming app you're listening on.
We're also at driveanddishpodcast.com. We are the Drive and Dish NBA podcast.
I move on to Bob McAdoo. 1975 is for the Buffalo Braves. 34.5 points per game. He led the NBA. Just an incredible point per game number. 14.1 rebounds per game. 43.2 minutes per game. So he had to play quite a lot. 17.8 win shares. Led the NBA, of course. Then .242 win shares per 48. Again, leading the NBA. And it's kind of interesting, that 34.5 points per game. Still to this day, there are only 15 seasons in NBA history that have 34 point per game in a season, and a lot of those that come, in different eras and whatnot. But I mean, still a super impressive number when we talk about only 15 people of all time having that. And as far as the Buffalo Braves, they were coached by Dr. Jack Ramsey, and they had one of the NBA's best offenses, but lost in Game 7 to the powerful, of course, Washington Bullets. And the Bullets, as we've mentioned many times in this podcast or in this series as well, they were upset in the NBA Finals in 4 games by Rick Barry and the Golden State Warriors. So they took the Bullets to 7 games. Probably gave them one of their biggest, maybe it was a foretelling of what was going to come, but the Bullets were an awesome team. And then, of course, the huge upset in the NBA Finals. But, the Buffalo Braves with Bob McAdoo on the top, they gave them a run for their money. They almost beat them. Yeah,
and McAdoo was, one of the first big men to really be perimeter-oriented in shooting. Somewhat of a proto-Dirk, I guess, in some respects. He was undersized as a center, but was able to, it took a while for him to sort of find a niche where he would be able to have team success, putting things around him. They put together a pretty young team. A good young team. They had Randy Smith. They had Ernie DiGregorio, Jack Marin, veteran who'd come from Baltimore, and Houston also was there. So they, of course, having Jack Ramsey as your coach, gave them a
certainly helps.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, he was definitely a different kind of player. For the day, probably would have been a guy who, even in later years would have been used even more effectively in more of a modern game, just because he had a shooting range and with a 3-pointer and with a style of play that would even favor players like him 30 years later. He certainly would 40 years later almost he certainly would have he excelled then, but I think his he would have even had longer lasting success probably in a different situation.
Certainly, and he's a guy who I think the perception of him gets kind of changed a little bit because a lot of people remember him as like that guy, the really old dude on the Lakers or whatever. Whereas, this Buffalo team, he came out there. There was 3 straight years where he led the NBA in scoring as the leader of the Buffalo Braves. I mean, he was their man, and he was on a fairly good team as well. But I think a lot of people remember him, and rightfully so, when the NBA exploded in popularity as a member of that, early 80s Lakers team, and just sort of a guy off the bench and just kind of another weapon for them and not like a leader or an awesome guy. But yeah, he's a a guy who just had a really, really awesome beginning of his career, and then just sort of also transitioned into kind of a role player role, and did that quite well as well. So.
Yeah, he definitely had a good second career with the Lakers and really did accomplish quite a bit there as well. 1974, Julius Erving, his first year with the Nets. He had 27.4 points per game, led the ABA actually down from the prior year at 31.9 points per game, but did really well in every other respect. 10.7 rebounds, 5.2 assists, 2.3 steals, 2.4 blocks, 16.5 win shares, which led the ABA, 2.33 win shares for 48, and 2.57 PR. All those led the league. There were only 4 seasons in NBA ABA history with 25 points per game, 10 rebounds per game, 5 assists, and 2 steals. Erving had 3 of them, including this one, and the other was George McGinnis in 1975, so who he shared the MVP with that year. So almost single-handedly led the Nets to the ABA championship that year. They only lost 2 games in the entire playoffs, and he had just an incredible season. I can't remember if it was 74 or 76, but one of those finals, he actually led the team in every single major category, much like LeBron did in the 2016 finals. Actually led both teams in those categories. Erving actually did the same thing in one of those 2 finals runs. I'll have to look it up later and see which one it was. But but that is something I recently learned, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, just when we say single-handedly, like, he was pretty far and away like the man on that team, and it's it's Julius Erving, and it's just an incredible beginning of his career. And I found something a little bit earlier today that I tweeted out that I loved, that he made the All-Star team in every single season he played. Not one time where they're like, I don't know about this Julius guy. Like, not even his final season, the beginning, not a single season where he did not make the All-Star team. That's awesome. Yeah,
and it took him a little bit, as a rookie. He didn't come in with with a whole lot of hype. So, he earned it. He obviously earned the hype right away, and obviously stayed with him his entire career. He had a couple of seasons where he struggled relative to his expectations in the late 70s, but he was obviously a great player and a worthy All-Star.
Certainly a popular player as well. Another thing, too, just not being hurt as well. And, just a remarkably consistent career his entire time. I know breaking news here about our Dr. J reveal that he is very good. But, I thought that was kind of startling, because even, you look at, the best of the best guys, and even, a Kobe Bryant, I know there was his rookie year, he didn't make the All-Star team, and sure. I think his second year or his third year or something like that. He's a guy who, then he went on a run of 15. That's one of the NBA's most popular players, and he went. But Julius, never single season did he miss the All-Star game or not make it to the All-Star team. I have no idea if he actually attended the All-Star games. I don't care.
Right. So. Yeah. Even Kareem missed a year or 2 with that. So the fact that Erving was able to be picked for it each year obviously says something.
Let's find out if Michael Jordan did. That's that's the barometer for everyone's basketball opinion. So let's find out if. So we can tweet that out and get people mad at us. I believe. Oh man,
he was injured one year. He was injured in 85. So
damn.
Or 86, I guess.
1995, he did not. I mean, he came back half.
Oh yeah, that's true. There is that.
But they probably still would have elected him. Okay, well, Michael Jordan made it except for 95, so we'll bring that up because he also lost in the playoffs that year, breaking. Yeah. Yes. By the way, Jason, as you like to point out,
one season that I think we should bring up is also Artis Gilmore's 72 season, his rookie season in the ABA. 23.8 points for a guy who was supposedly just a defender at the time. 17.8 rebounds, 2.7 assists, 5 blocks a game, with a 598 field goal percentage. So not a terrible, getting to the line 7.2 times a game, pretty much everything there. Shooting 64% from the line, that got up to mostly in the 70% for the rest of his career. So he was a pretty good free throw shooter as well. Gilmore's a guy who, like Kareem, you can pick a lot of seasons that stand out to you. Pretty much all 5 of his ABA seasons are just incredibly awesome. But his rookie year stands out. Particularly the blocks numbers is pretty incredible.
Yeah, and you'll notice that when we kind of went through all these, there's not a lot of the late 70s, which is actually pretty interesting. That when we did a lot of this research, we found that a lot of the great seasons all kind of happened in the first half of the decade. It's really hard to find. There's Bill Walton's 1977 is one that stood out to us that we're going to talk about a little bit, but it kind of dropped off. But you look at and that list that I mentioned, if you do win shares per 48 and only the 70s, you'll notice that it's just it's remarkable how many of them came. I believe of the top 25, I think 2 of them maybe came after 1975. It's just it's nuts. And both of those are Julius Erving and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, which again we didn't want to talk about them again, but just kind of telling. I don't know what the exact reason for that is or what that could be, but it was just kind of interesting to see that it was, that early part of the decade where we saw these great seasons, and then there wasn't a whole lot of amazing seasons after that, other than Kareem. Kareem had many of them, but
and we were going to talk about the parity in the NBA in a future show, and I think that might have just a lot to do with it, just the way that the stars were distributed, just the way that the talent kind of merged, and the fact that some of the strongest players weren't necessarily on the strongest teams at that point either, may have had something to do with that. But it's an interesting speculation.
And there's, of course, a bunch of great names and guys who have had solid, Bob Lanier's, Dan Issels, guys we're going to talk about in future episodes or when we talk about the parody a little bit more. But yeah, it's just I thought that was a very interesting thing, that it was just this first half of the decade was all this great, individual seasons. And then it really, really drops off the last half. Not that these guys didn't have great seasons, but like when we talk about all time, eye-popping great seasons, they're all in the first half of the 70s.
Absolutely. So. All right, well, thanks, everyone, for checking us out. Hope you are enjoying our Basketball Mysteries of the 1970s series. Please let us know if you're into it. Leave us a rating and review on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you're listening to your podcast. You can tweet us at Over and Back NBA. Also the same for Facebook at Over and Back NBA. So thanks for listening. We'll be back again soon.